One of the biggest problems with big centerpiece models is usually there's only one or two sculpts available of the given thing you want. Well, today we're going to change that. You see, a little while ago we kit bashed this monstrosity, this awesome ship golem, and people wouldn't believe how we did it. We used HeroForge. And today we're gonna try and break their software again to make a massive giant that's gonna face off against this and prove to you just how versatile the kit bashing system has become on HeroForge. It's tabletop time. So for those who don't know what kit bashing is, I'll give you a brief rundown. Kit bashing in physical miniatures is grabbing parts from different kits, sticking them together and creating something new. Kit bashing in digital form is taking parts of different STLs, sticking them together and creating something new. Well, HeroForge, it's an online program that allows you to create custom characters, especially well tailored to things like RPG campaigns where you can create the perfect player character or villains to work in your campaigns. But it goes well beyond just that. They introduced a feature called kit bashing last year to their Pro Plus subscribers. And the way this works is you get access to this digital library that you can add on to your base model. You can rescale parts, you can change parts, you can modify proportions, and it really unlocks a host of tools that takes HeroForge from a program that was really good into something that is almost revolutionary for this space. So for the purposes of this video and the previous, we want to push kit bashing beyond what it is intended for, because it's intended to create custom miniatures, single models for your game, but we want to show you that you can use it for a lot more by compartmentalizing it. So rather than making a single model and giving them a bunch of parts, we're actually going to break that cap of 20 items per model by creating individual parts of a larger creation. Yes, this giant is going to be forged out of 3 components, but as with all things HeroForge, the best thing to do is to dive in and start exploring and see what parts we've got to work with. Welcome to HeroForge. Here we are, green screened onto my screen as we start looking at making a creation. Now, if you're making something humanoid like a giant, we can actually use the framework of a character to do a huge amount of the work. But rather than mucking about in these scale tabs and making it really big, I'm just gonna enlarge it later. So for my creation, what am I thinking? Well, I've seen a fair few models that seem to fall into the category of like a hill giant, a big dopey giant. I've seen frost giants, I've seen storm giants with a Norse aesthetic. But something that rarely gets touched on is evil giants, one that have been manipulated and warped into something a little bit more bestial. It's a classic aesthetic for a different take on giants, the fee fi fo fum, eat your goats kind of vibe, and I am looking to create that. And to start, I'm gonna focus on making a really characterful face, manipulating all of the proportions of this head to make it feel slightly inhuman. This giant lower jaw, all the better for eating you with, as well as the sort of smaller top of the cranium and exaggerated features and orcish teeth really help to make a face that looks unique and giant. It just doesn't quite look normal, and when you go for these ogre-like proportions, it does evoke a little bit of a fantasy vibe. I've also pushed the age sliders up, which add a huge amount of creases and definition to the face. It's a really good way to add a lot of character. A massive handlebar mustache is applied because it just sounds fun, and that kind of gives me a bit of the vibe of the character. Another major change I can make is adding these satyr legs to the bottom half of the model. But short of adding on a little torso piece, there isn't much more I can do with the basic character editor to get the giant I'm looking for. So the way I'm gonna have to make this is to break it down into 3 sections, and the first section I'm going to focus on is the legs. Now the reason for this is the kit bashing parts limitation. To create something massive, you obviously want to add a lot of detail to it, but you're limited to 20 individual items added to each kit bash. So if I want to deck out the legs of this model as if it's a giant, I'm probably going to reach that cap just here. So to create the feeling of a giant, it's important to create a sense of scale, and I can do that by adding normal human scale items onto the model. So I start with this chain guard hanging down from the belt of the giant. This is made up of a couple of weapons, and these are fantastic because they give you chains that have multiple linking points that you can move and adjust. With these chains posed as if they're flowing in the wind, then I can add a string of circular shields that this giant has attached onto his belt as protection. Not many people are making armor for giants in their scale, so of course he makes do. With this tabard roughed into place, I can move on to some more details. I like the idea of him having a little water bottle or canteen, but that's of course ridiculous in giant scale. So I grab a witch's cauldron, this massive pot, and hang it off the back of his belt. And then what stew would a giant eat but a stew of bones? So I fill the cauldron with a little pile of bones to simulate that he's maybe been brewing up something on a campfire in a cauldron which is mug-sized to him. I also want to add a few more straps of makeshift armor and equipment that the giant has put on himself. So I get a massive tower shield and strap it to one of his legs using a headband. And then on his other legs, I grabbed this giant turtle shell, which I like to think is literally like a Galapagos turtle shell that he's using as a knee band, and I attached that on with an amulet, which is actually a clothed neck item. For the lower part of that leg, I use a ragged shirt, and I find some of the clothing objects are actually the best objects to use when kit bashing. They have a lot of manipulation points because they need to be able to adhere to the models, which actually gives you a lot of ways that you can morph and manipulate the object. Some of the headwear items and handheld items actually don't have many points within the object. You can manipulate them, which makes them harder to fit and repurpose in other areas of models. And here I would love to give a suggestion to HeroForge. As more and more people are using kit bashing, it would be fantastic to have some items added to the repertoire of HeroForge that are kind of designed exactly for what I'm doing. If we could just have a length of chain and a length of rope and a length of fur and a length of cloth, just 4 basic items that had a bunch of rotational pivot points that we could morph around objects to create cloth wrapping, leather wrapping, fur additions, chains, it would be fantastic. I decided to add a sword that's broken and stuck into this guy's tower shield, and then an entire human's tombstone, which he's using as a bit of a good luck charm hanging from his belt. As we get all of these parts onto the model, we start to approach that limit of 20 items, and it's time for me to export the model. So at this point, I simply use a digital credit, and you can get digital credits by being a Pro Plus subscriber, but you can also just buy a digital download. With this part downloaded, this is where we need to start doing a little bit of extra work to get kit bashes to work. I told you we're trying to sort of push the boundaries of HeroForge beyond what it's meant to be used for, so that can sometimes require a little bit of jerry-rigging. And it is in Blender that I'll be doing that. All I need to do is use a simple Boolean operation. I can show you all how to do that. Basically, you get Blender and you import your STL. Then you'll get a piece of simple geometry like a cube, create that and overlap the model. You select the model you want to cut in half, grab that Boolean modifier, and then select the difference operation. It'll effectively subtract the part of the geometry that is not overlapping the cube. So I guess to put it in layman's terms, everything that is inside the cube is staying, everything outside the cube is going, or you can actually do the opposite operation as well. So everything outside the cube stays and everything that overlaps the cube is deleted. So using this technique, I can find a slicing point where I'm basically just severing the model in half. And if I get all of my versions of my model aligned exactly on top of each other, which is super easy, just import them in the same location, then they'll all be cut at the same point and I can join them back together later. But with the legs cut off, it's time to get them printing, curing, and cleaning so that we can get to work painting up the bottom half of this model. As always, when supporting, hollowing, and printing my own models, I'm always a little bit nervous they're actually gonna work. So let's take a look. We've got the legs printed, and I'm optimistic. Okay, this might have worked, and they're big. This is a big guy. Let's take this print off, clean it up, and then we can take a closer look.
So I'm back and I am feeling so much better than I was in our previous video. My cold has virtually gone away. I'm really excited to get started with this monster that Dave has created, and we need to do his base. So Murray has cut out this really nice base with MDF. I kind of am into doing lava at the moment, so I think I want to do a bit of lava effects. But with all that said and done, all we're going to do is to do it. So the first thing I need to mention is for this miniature, I worked back and forth quite a bit in between painting the base and painting the legs of this guy. So you will have noticed that some bits are done and other parts aren't, but it just makes it easier to explain. So before I start painting in any of the lava effects that are gonna be on this landscape, I need to put in the colors for the rocks of what they would be in normal lighting. Considering we're using a lot of warmer tones here, I opted for some cooler colors as a nice contrast. Dry brushing these on top of the cork to really pick out the texture and the those edges. Once that was done, I could move on to my lava effects. Now, I've done this a couple of times with an army that I'm building for Age of Sigmar, so I had a little bit of practice, but I'm still refining my technique. The first thing I did was put down a layer of really thin, watery white paint. Once this was done, it was time for the brightest color of the lava, which would be a yellow. Again, painting this all over where I had laid down the white and pushing this a little bit further to create more of a highlight. And then after yellow, you guessed it, comes orange and red. Again, doing the same thing, just laying these on top of each other and then pushing it further and further up the rocks. Between each of these color layers, I went back and did a little bit of dry brushing on the peaks of those rocks just to make sure they stayed nice and crispy. Recently, I've been trying to improve the way I do environments. When we did the board for the Kindred, I really enjoyed painting in those waves, so I wanted to give it a try here. I decided to try and paint the crackle in between the rocks instead of using a texture paste. And I think this turned out pretty well. That's pretty much it for the basing, so now we can move on to the legs of this guy. Now for the real meat and bones of this project, tackling the legs of this monstrosity. Whenever painting miniatures, I like to use Dave's method of painting them essentially naked and then working your way to the outer layers. So for this guy, that was painting in fur. Because we had already laid down some colors using the Vallejo sprays, this really does create an awesome foundation to start painting this project. All we needed to do was separate the different types of browns we wanted to use and where to use them. It's interesting to know as well that when you're picking different colors, they will appear different to how it's undercoated. So for example, because this guy has a lot of red and bluish undertones mixing in to make brown, if I put a green on top of this, it might look a little bit different than what it does on the bottle. This is great, however, because it gives us more options in terms of browns. We can go into more of a green spectrum or more into a red spectrum, but overall there's more variety to use. So in this instance, I went for more of a reddish brown. I laid down a base coat trying to pick out all of those big tufts of fur with this reddish brown, and once the base coat was done, I went ahead and started painting in those individual hairs, trying to create a nice and glossy sheen to his coat. Like, this is a guy who doesn't skip on his egg breakfast. And even just having this major part of the model done, I was super happy with how this was looking, and it made me really confident that I knew I could get the rest of it done. So putting a lot of attention into the fur meant that I could go ahead and do the other objects and put a little bit less attention into those, such as the rope and bones, which were just done in simple colors, and putting a little bit more effort and layers into the metals and the turtle shell on his knee.
One of the really cool things about HeroForge is it's constantly evolving. I've been using HeroForge for years to create models for my miniature campaigns, but HeroForge is never stagnant, constantly adding new items to their roster that you can use for your models, and now they have a brand new campaign on Kickstarter. Let's say you've got a famous orc in your campaign that loves blowing stuff up. Well, now you can get custom themed dice. That's right, HeroForge's new campaign is for 3D printed dice. Anything you possibly want, from a character bust to head to item or pet that you can make in HeroForge and color can be printed in a dice. And not only a D6, they have XL dice, regular size dice, and also all the polyhedrals you'd expect. You can even choose to make your D20 a spin down instead of a regular D20 if you'd rather use it as a life counter. This can allow you to commemorate your favorite characters or moments in campaigns by having a fully colored and rollable balanced dice for use in your tabletops. And you can do all this with HeroForge's new Kickstarter. Go to the Kickstarter, the links are in our description, and check out this campaign for these 3D printed dice. There are heaps of perks for backing the Kickstarter, such as early access to the dice maker, a standard size or XL D20, a regular mini statuette or prototype Ultra HD mini. There's a lot of stuff to get. You can even work with HeroForge to create your own part that will go into the catalog. It's very niche, it's very cool. So go check out the Kickstarter, links are in the description, and we're gonna go back to making this giant. Okay, back to some modeling and moving on to the top half of the model. I've got to add some more decorations here. You would have noticed from earlier that he's sort of waving a hand above his head. what's he doing with that? Well, the answer is he's chugging a beer. You see, giants in most fiction love a good drink, and I thought it would be great to put an ale cask in his hand. They have a bunch of spell effects that in standard use for HeroForge are designed to create magic spells projecting from hands or being cast from implements. But in Kit Bash, you can actually take them and use them for whatever you want. So this magic water splash effect actually looks awesome as beer pouring out of this keg. Moving around to his back, we have this fantastic frozen sigil. This symbol looks nice and demonic and chaotic, so I'm gonna stick it on his back as a massive totem to his dark deities that will also help to reflect the evil nature of this giant. And to add another fun little touch and to give that sense of scale again, I actually decided to take a crown, a king's crown, and shrink it down and then daintily place it on top of this giant's broken horn. Because I'm assuming at some point he ate a king and he thought that bit of head decoration would go really nicely on his broken horn. And this is where I want to get really crafty. I like the idea of this model having sort of strings of chain. I'm almost thinking like a gladiator, or maybe inspired by 300 from Xerxes and the Persians in that movie. It's an interesting idea, and it's something that I can imagine this giant would have access to and would potentially use. They might get tangled on things, but he's a giant, so anything they get tangled on, he's probably just going to tear in half anyway. And as another nice little piece, I'm putting the most ornate Minotaur-themed round shield on his big belly, which I think will just add a nice center focal area on the model. One more thing I did is actually add a bunch of hair onto this model. I thought he's got goat legs, he should have hair everywhere else. So I grabbed beards. That's right, literal beards that are meant for use in dwarves, goblins, and in fact bat folk for this one. And I shoved them on the chest and into the underarms of this model. He's got those satyr legs, so bring that hairiness up through the body is actually a really great way to carry that motif across. And the beards are a really good choice because, as with most of the facial items or clothes items, they have a few points where you can manipulate them, bending or moving them and allowing you to position them by clicking on each individual node and adjusting their rotation. With all these little additions, I can cut out and export the torso of the model and take that into Blender as well, bullioning it so that it will fit nicely onto those legs, and we have two sections here. The last part of the giant that I need to create is the arm. You see, I decided that the club he was dragging around just wasn't quite working with me, so I took it back into the pose and changed all of these subtle dimensions about the hand and the arm and the wrist, so it just looked like it was holding something a bit better. I actually went with an orbed wooden staff that can look a lot like a tree trunk, and I decided to add a lot of the detail onto it myself. Giants fighting dragons brings me back to Skyrim, and I think that's a great idea, so I decided to grab a huge amount of horns and tusk-like objects that I imagine have been beaten out of massive draconic creatures. And then the giant has sort of wrapped around and joined onto the end of his club as trophies, but also as ways to make his weapon far more deadly. So with the giant club made, I can export that, get that booleaned off, so it can become the third and final part of this model. And with all three parts, we can clean them up and bring this model together.
To tackle this literal giant task, we have actually kept the two parts separate, so Jen can paint one half and I will paint the other. However, when it comes to priming them, we did slap them back together just so we got a nice even gradient over both pieces. And with our nice blue fading to red, creating a nice earthy brown tone, we could start painting. And as Jen and I move on to each new part to paint, we'll converse with each other and work out what colors we want to do so we don't clash with each other's halves, I suppose, or to keep a nice consistency throughout the miniature when we bring it back together at the end. Now, particularly for fantasy creatures like this giant, brown is a really good starting point as it allows you to go straight into things like leather and skin, and there's a lot of skin and fur. All these natural materials which really benefit from starting with brown really allow you to get the most out of the miniature, and for me, painting all of the skin, getting a nice smooth tone is quite the challenge, so I'm really happy that we decided to go with this technique. And starting off, I'm going to be really rough, just placing down splotches of colors, basically the contours of where I want highlights to be at the end, and I can blend them back as I move along. And I have to say, as I get deeper and deeper into painting this miniature, I'm actually finding more Easter eggs that Dave has hidden in here. For example, it actually took me quite a while to realize that there is a crown wedged on the broken horn on his head. I didn't even notice that. I just thought it was part of the horn. And while some of the textures work so well in HeroForge, being blown up to this ridiculous magnitude, some of them needed a little bit of extra attention, particularly the belt on the front, which is blown out to such proportions that it's just a bit chunky and flat. So it's gonna need a little bit of extra attention. So I'm gonna use the brush and scribble in some torn and scuffed bits of the leather. This is a fairly simple effect, but it really helps to elevate the concept that this is cracked and dried leather and not just a big brown snake wrapped around the front of him. The metals here are also gonna be really fun, as I'm not actually going to change the undertone from this red. I'm gonna have that reflecting all of the other colors. So that can stay there as an undertone, and I'm just gonna brush over the top and get those nice reflections happening, using blues for the silver and then nice ochres and yellows for the golds. Then there's just the matter of painting the beer that he's quaffing by the barrel load, painting that a desaturated yellow color, then highlighting it with bone to really get that frothiness. And then it's time to start painting the big weird rock sigil that's on his back. Yeah.
We'd like to give a massive thank you to all of our patrons. Your support is truly what is keeping us going. And if you'd like to join our Patreon, join our exclusive mini club, get involved in our monthly mini reviews, or just catch our behind the scenes that we put up weekly, a little vlog update over on Patreon. The links are down in the description, and it really does support the channel and lets us all keep working on making content for you. Oh my gosh, guys, you've done such a good job. This is so cool.
It's so big.
I haven't seen it painted. Now I've seen it painted. This is super impressive.
Although this is facing the column.
Oh, he's got more than just a bun. And
To the camera, there we go.
I didn't mention it in the video, but I hand sculpted those nipples, and you did a great job painting them, guys.
Nice.
Thank you all for watching the video. Thank you to HeroForge for sponsoring the video. And remember, go to the link in the description to check out HeroForge's custom dice Kickstarter. It's really cool and would make for a great gift, especially for those who love role-playing games out there. Do you have anything you want to add, guys?
Nipple tutorial when?
See you in the next video.
You really threw us.